Quite an odyssey to get here. Traffic was really bad, but finally made it in, so I'm really happy to be here today. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic that we have seen proactively throughout this year, which is the theft of personal privacy information from major corporations, U.S. government, health industry, and pretty much what U.S. CERT, as the organization responsible for investigating and mitigating some of the cyber incidents within the U.S. government, have done. So we're going to talk about some of the lessons learned. We're going to talk about some of the capabilities that are here. And the goal of this presentation is to give you an overview of those incidents and what we have worked on. For those of you that are familiarized with the traffic light protocol, as you know, we use that within the international community to be able to share information. So that way it's safeguarded and shared with trusted communities. In this case, this is TLP green, which means that you can leverage it and distribute it within your own respective organizations, but you cannot put it on a public website. So here's the agenda for today. Again, some of the data breaches that we have worked on, personal identifiable information analysis, some of the use cases that we worked on, some of the top cyber threat actors, vectors that we have seen as a result of those incidents. One of the things that you're going to hear me talk about today is that whenever there's a major breach, we actually deploy a team to go on site, just like, for example, Mandiant will go and do an investigation on the private side. And so when we go on site, we are able to identify specifically new information, new indicators of compromise, new malware that has not been previously reported. So we also want to capture some of that and some of the mitigation recommendations. First of all, obviously about our organization, we are the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team. We have the responsibility to respond to major incidents, analyze threats, and share information with all of our partners and constituents. What you're going to hear me talk about today as I proceed with the presentation is that initially this organization was stood up to protect the federal government's networks. It has since 2003, when it was first stood up, it has since now mature and continue to grow into now expanding our collaboration with industry, private sector, academia, international community, and the rest of our partners. So it's no longer just working with the government on the federal level and protecting the federal networks, but also working with private sector as well. Here's some of the key capabilities that we have. When we first started, we had no monitoring capability, we had no malware analysis capability, we had no forensics capability. So as we grew and matured, we began early in 2005, 2008, deploying some of the sensors that we custom built. We call it Einstein, and these are the sensors that actually get deployed to all of the federal agencies within the US government to be able to alert on specific signatures that are tied to a specific cyber threat. Now we have a full malware lab on our building. We have a full staff 24/7 to do malware analysis in real time as we receive it. All of our partners, initially we were only receiving malware samples from US federal agencies, but now we have also expanded that capability to all of our partners. So if you're a part of the OAS community and you have a specific piece of malware that you would like us to analyze for you, you can submit it to us, we'll analyze it and give you more information. So we're not trying to be the virus total of the US government, but we are able to do analysis and give you that information and give you that feedback. All of the analysis that we do, whether it's malware analysis, threat analysis, and forensic analysis, it gets put into a product that we share with all of our community partners. You will see that the reports that we share will not include the name of the victim. It will not include the source of the information. It will only say from a trusted partner we received this information, right? But it will never disclose the identity of the organization who gave us that information. As you can see here, some of the products and services on a daily basis, or I should say on a weekly basis, we share a lot of products in the form of indicator bulletins, joint analysis reports, stuff that we put on our public website, uscert.gov. You're going to see a lot of the vulnerability alerts. And also, you can see here at the bottom quadrant how many malware samples we analyze on a weekly basis. And we're talking about at least 106,000 malware samples that get submitted to us for analysis. How are we able to do that? We can't have hands analyzing this every single day. So what we have is we develop a tool called the AMAC, or Automatic Malware Analysis Center. And the AMAC is pretty much a sandbox that we developed that when you submit a malware sample, it will immediately go into the sandbox and analyze it and triage it and let us know if there's anything nefarious or malicious with this specific malware sample. If there is, then we will move forward with the investigation. But if it's considered to be very, very malicious, meaning that it's tied to, let's say, a APT or nation-state act or activity, then we move over to doing the actual reverse engineering. So not every single malware sample gets reverse engineered, only those that we consider to be that warrant more activities. Okay? So it is important that one of the things that you're going to hear me say today here is share responsibility. So if an incident happened in a hospital, does that mean that I should be concerned, right? And 5 years ago, that was not the case. This year and moving forward, obviously, we are concerned because it impacts and affects all of us. So we have to expand our collaboration to work not only with government partners, but also with industry, federal agencies, local governments, state governments, right? Tribal nations. As you know, here in the United States, we have tribal nations still, right? And it's important that we do this level of collaboration in order to foster a community of trust. And again, share responsibility, trusted relationships. At the end of the day, for those of you that are working in incident response, computer network defense, you know that we cannot do it alone. In some cases, you from your organization or your country may be able to see something that I have not seen yet. So if I'm seeing some activity and I can share it with the community, then you're going to be able to let me know what you're seeing, and it'll be able to better help me with my investigation. If I find indicators of compromise that were newly discovered and haven't been disclosed or published in any public forum, and I give that information to you, then now we're sharing that information and it helps you with your investigation. So it's important to understand that we're not going to be able to do alone. But it presents challenges. It is not easy when you're a federal organization reaching out to a private company and say, hey, please work with me. There are issues with that, right? Here in the United States, you have board of directors, shareholders, and a lot of those companies do not want to work with the government because every single time that you have the government reaching out to a private company, the perception is that the government wants my information, right? And what are they going to do with my information? This is my information, right? So it becomes a challenge. And so as a result of that, we have lawyers on our actual office that are designed to help us do that level of communication. So from the analyst perspective, we want to work together. But we have to work through our lawyers team to be able to interact with the lawyers of the private institution, the private company, so they both agree on what we can say, what we can work with, what we can share, and that way we build trust relationships. Another partner that we have is academia. We work with a lot of the major universities that we have here in the United States. They pretty much have a very good resource to have. They have actual students that want to learn, that want to sharpen their saw, that want to practice on multiple things. And sometimes we, the government, cannot do a lot of things. For example, if I want to know how much malicious activity is happening on the internet over a specific port, let's say 22 or 443. I may not be able to do that as a U.S. government entity because immediately it is perceived that the U.S. government is out there looking for someone, and that becomes a problem. But if I can have Harvard University say, hey, why don't you do some research on how much internet activity is happening associated with this specific service or port, and then tell me what you found and share with me your findings, then that's a different perspective. Because now it's being taken from a research and development and actually giving us information that we can probably use. So as you can see, we can still get to the same goal. We just simply have to figure out how to get to that point. We also have to work with all 16 critical sectors that we have here in the United States. Obviously, every country is going to be different. Obviously, when we talk about critical sectors, we include electricity, nuclear, dams, water, health sector, and so forth. There's all 16 of them, right? So we have another team called the Industrial Control Systems CERT, and the ICS, or Industrial Control Systems CERT, is responsible for interacting with those private companies that run and manage our critical infrastructure, buildings, dams, and so forth. So what's the difference between working with the critical sectors and working with the government and private sector? The difference is this team over here, these sectors are actually regulated. They're regulated, they're mandated to perform specific tasks, therefore they have no requirement to report to US CERT any of those incidents. None. There's no legal statute that says you must report an incident to United States CERT. So what we have to do is, on a at-will basis, collaboration, we work with them. So what happens is when you work with an organization who is accustomed to do things their own way because they have to. When you're looking at industrial control systems, you're talking about SCADA systems that are responsible for opening gates, dams, shutting down the power grid, and so forth. So they have infrastructure that may be outdated. Believe it or not, some of these organizations still were running Windows 98, Windows NT. And so how do you actually get them to understand that you need to probably move from that because you're susceptible to so many vulnerabilities? And every time we have a conversation with them, their CEO says, well, if I shut down that system for 1 hour, I'll lose $50 million. So, it's a challenge because those systems, those infrastructure systems actually manage an infrastructure that can cause many, many issues. But as you can see, we have to work with them in order to share information, ensure they have situational awareness of the cyber threats that are out there and the potential risk to them. One of the major trends that we have in 2015, which started in 2014, I want to say in the summer, July timeframe of last year, into this year, is the situation of bulk PII, or bulk privacy information, be stolen from specifically, we can see so much news articles about the health sector, Anthem, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and some of the different type of companies that actually manage a lot of the health systems here. But we also have the situation with Sony Pictures, and we also have a situation with the Office of Personnel Management within the U.S. government and the IRS. So it's a difference here, and I want to talk about that a little bit before I start going over the use cases. In the case of Sony, it's a whole different ballgame, which did a change in how we do things. So we're accustomed to, there's an incident, we know who it is, they're going to go after criminal information, maybe they're criminals, and they're going after stealing my information, they can sell it in the black market, so maybe my personal information can be sold so they can gain some profit. In this case, we're talking about a nation-state actor, in this case was publicly announced as North Korea, or allegedly believe, actually went after a U.S. company responsible for entertainment. So who would have thought that today we're talking about a movie industry being completely owned and completely decimated by another cyber threat actor? In this case, they actually used something that we haven't seen before. Maybe we have, but not as usual. They use destructive malware. This malware, we actually were able to, because Mandiant was the one that worked on this incident, they went on site, Sony hired them and worked with the FBI, and they were able to investigate the Sony incident. They actually gave us the piece of malware. When we brought the piece of malware from Sony and we put it into our own malware lab, it didn't do anything. And do you know the reason why it didn't do anything? Because the malware was hard-coded with the network IP range of Sony, the internal IP range. And it was also hard-coded with the local admin accounts, username and passwords, all hard-coded in the malware. So if I give you that piece of malware right now, it will not do anything because it's designed to destroy that specific victim. So what our malware team did is we actually changed our sandbox network to mimic the one of Sony. So we changed the IP range to that of Sony to try to replicate the activity. And immediately when we did that, the malware began to execute, and within less than 2 minutes, the operating system was completely wiped and destroyed. The master boot record, MBR, was completely erased and immediately rebooted the machine, so when it came back, there was nothing to restore to, within less than 2 minutes. Now, we know how bad this is because we experienced it ourselves in our own environment. We replicated the activity. So this is something, it's a game changer, right, that we haven't seen before. So the question is, if this happened to this private company, then what is it to say it could not happen to any of us here sitting today within our respective organizations? It could happen at any time. So if we're talking about malware that can destroy your computer machines in less than 2 minutes, then how quickly can you identify the malware, contain, and eradicate it? It's almost impossible. In this case, I will tell you, Sony had to completely destroy the entire network in the United States government, in the United States, completely. The entire network infrastructure was completely destroyed. They had to go to a local store and buy personal laptops, and then work from home using the Wi-Fi network because they could no longer operate and work because the entire network was destroyed completely in the whole United States. So it's a challenge, but it's reality, and that's what we're seeing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the OPM incident, the Office of Personnel Management. For those of you that are tracking a lot of the major cyber breaches, this is not news this year. It was first announced last year where, hey, possible advanced persistent threat or nation-state actors went after the Office of Personnel Management. Do you know what happened when we talked to their leadership? We talked to their CIO, and we said, hey, what could they be going after? What are your crown jewels? Could they be going after the clearance records? All the applications for everyone that wants to work for the government has to do a clearance application. And that includes all your personal information, right? Where you were born, your mama, your daddy, your uncles, your aunts, your grandmother, your friends, everybody you knew from the moment you were born to present time, it's in there. What schools you went to, how many addresses you ever lived, how many phone numbers you ever had, all your information that you ever owned that is tied to you, it's recorded in that application. And you know what the OPM CIO said? There's no way possible they can do that. It's sitting on a mainframe, and there's no way, that's old technology, so there's no way for them to interact. So I'll tell you today what happened. So we saw the actors coming in. Once again, they were doing the reconnaissance in the OPM network. They were looking for information, and we saw them come to a screeching halt when they came to the mainframe database. You know why? Because they're used to target Windows machines, Linux machines, but they never interacted with a mainframe. So you know what they did? They actually stole the manuals that will show you how to interact with the mainframe. Went back home, studied the manuals for 2 weeks, and then guess what happened 2 weeks later? Now we have an incident. Because they learned the trade, they learned how to interact with a technology they were not aware of, and they were able to successfully compromise the information. So we have a situation here when we have persistent threats that when they identify what they're after and they target you as the next one in line, they will do everything they can to go after you and steal that information. And this is evident in the case of the OPM incident. Another interesting situation in the OPM incident I want to share with you is the concept of what we call type squatter domains. Type squatter, people call it doppelganger domains, different names. Basically, this is fake domains that are associated with the victim, right? So in the case of OPM, we identified a domain called opmsecurity.org, right? So as we continue to analyze the traffic and look at outbound traffic, the security team for OPM saw outbound connections over port 443, SSL connections, to opmsecurity.org. So that was what's going on here. We're supposed to be opm.gov. So why is there traffic from our internal network going back to opmsecurity.org? I'll tell you this much. One of the recommendations that we provided last year to OPM is to deploy an SSL decryptor technology. So that way, if you're able to see traffic that you want to investigate, an SSL decryptor will be able to open that specific traffic and let you see inside that tunnel. Luckily, OPM listened to our advice. They actually deploy an SSL decryptor technology, and when they saw the traffic going to opmsecurity.org, what they found was that domain had a self-signed certificate. Now, we all know here in security that we should not have any websites with self-signed certificates. So now you have a lot of red bells going off. A lot of alarms are going off right now saying, hey, you have a domain that looks just like me. It is using a self-signed certificate. So who is connecting to this domain now? And they were able to backtrack from there, all of the activity going back to June last year, and all the time this traffic was happening, no one saw it. Because it was going over to 443, which we all allow. We all allow port 80 and 443 going outbound, right? So it was going through, almost mimicking legitimate traffic. It was going to a domain that looked just like OPM. As a result of that, they were able to then go back in time, retroactively, to find out how much activity was actually occurring to this specific domain, opmsecurity.org, and it was able to give them the information that you're now hearing on the news, that it happened last year, but that you're now finding out. Another interesting development here is that we also, because we do a lot of the net flow capturing, all of the inbound and outbound traffic over IP and ports, we were able to then look at what IP address opmsecurity.org was actually assigned to, and then look across the entire federal government through our Einstein tool, because it gives us the visibility to scan or sweep across to find out who in the entire federal government is connecting to this one IP address. And that's how we found what you heard in the news about the Department of Interior, which that's how we found the information. So the Department of Interior connection was a new development that we didn't know, and we found it through that level of activity that we did. So as you can see, everything that I just disclosed right now to you and share with you is activity that you would normally would not do as part of the investigation process, because that's something takes you thinking outside of the box, you know? If I see traffic outbound 443, then it must be legitimate. Nothing looks bad, right? But unless you take the time to dig further, right, and analyze, you're never gonna really find out all those telltale signs or clues that may be out there, okay? Now I'm gonna talk real quick about the health sector incidents that we had this year that we worked on. We had the Anthem, about 80 million records, the Primera incident, and of course the community health services. All of those incidents involve the FBI being the lead because they're private companies. So we cannot knock on the door, kick it in and say, we're the big government, let us in, okay? We have to work with those that have the authorities, and that's a key word here, the authority to perform certain actions. So the FBI has the authority to be able to do this, right? They go to a judge who assigns a warrant, a subpoena, they go inside, they're able to work together. Without that warrant from the lawyer or from the judge, that private company would not let the FBI inside their doors. So it's a process that goes with that. It's important that we understand that, right? So they go through the process, they get the legal approval, they go knock on the door and say, I have a warrant that says you need to let me in. Now they let them in, and now they begin to investigate. But how do we tie into this? How does the U.S. CERT ties into this whole thing? So since the FBI has a lead and we work together, and they actually sit on our floor, we have FBI agents that actually sit on our floor on a daily basis. So they're able to go on site, identify the threat, investigate the threat, and then give that information to us. So when they give that information to us, we then are able to do the malware analysis, provide them information on that, and also be able to generate indicator bulletins that will have all of the indicators of compromise associated with those specific incidents. Other incidents that actually made the news, but that were pretty much out there, Ashley Madison. You may be wondering, well, what does U.S. CERT have to do with that, right? We know what it is, it's a website that allows cheaters to do their thing. It's okay, but we have nothing to do with that. But actually, we became engaged because we also have to investigate, guess what? How many federal employees had an account on Ashley Madison? And believe me, there were many. And some of them were dumb enough to register with their own federal email account, which, you can't make that up. It's just unbelievable. They actually register accounts with their own federal email account. So it was unbelievable, but we had several. So again, we went from Sony to OPM to the health sector to dealing with Ashley Madison and find out which federal employee decided to have an account with them. This is some of the trends that I want to share with you in terms of what we began to identify in 2014. And you can see a trend here where we have primarily prior to 2014, mostly what we had was government and military being targeted through incidents. We had banking, because a lot of the threat actors wants to go after the bank industry and try to steal as much information as possible, and a couple of businesses here and there. But we never had the medical sector before, and we never had the educational sector before. And as I stated before, the education sector is now being a prime target for cyber threat actors because there's a lot of research that goes on in the academic sector that a lot of government entities will sponsor, they will actually give them money, they'll actually fund them and give them money so they can do research on specific things. Now, in the U.S. government, we have a concept called the Centers of Academic Excellence, CAE. So the Centers of Academic Excellence is when the Department of Homeland Security, that's where I'm from, actually then authorizes a U.S. university meets all the requirements to be able to consider to be a center of academic excellence. Once they become certified, they receive federal funds to be able to train employees, federal employees, develop training curriculums for people who want to learn cyber and come into the federal government, develop programs to do malware analysis, to do analysis on net flow traffic and develop trends and activities. Those are things that none of us are ever going to have the time to do because we're so focused on putting out the fire. There's an alarm, we need to answer to the incident. No one has the time to take a step back and analyze the situation and develop trends and metrics and so forth, right? And that's why academia becomes really important. In the case of the health sector, you can imagine everything about you is in there, right? Everything about your personal information is in there. So let's say that I'm an APT actor, right? Call me China, whatever, right? And I want to go after one specific individual. All I have is his name. I don't have any other way to know more information about this individual. If I'm able to target his medical record, I'm going to know everything about him in terms of, who he knows, emergency contact, all of the information. From there, I go into LinkedIn, look him up, and then in LinkedIn, I'm going to find out where he ever worked, what schools he went to, who are his colleagues, and I'm going to know all of that. So once I know all of that information, guess what I can do next? I can craft a very, very legitimate email that looks just like the one buddy he has that works in this specific project for this specific company, and now I can send it to him, and guess what he's going to do? He's going to click on that link and open that attachment, because now I was able to make a very, very, very realistic, crafted phishing email. So medical records actually do give cyber threat actors an immense amount of information and tools for them to then figure out the best way to target you and come after you. So here's the trend for 2014. Now you see the trend now, 2015. We can see the growth here. Look at the number of, I'm gonna focus on the right side, and look at the number of percentage of records breached. Okay, last year it was only 8.28. Look at this year so far, and this is as of September 8th. We have over 109 million records, all from all the incidents that we have dealt with thus far this year. So the trend continues to go up, and this is just a trend in the United States. We can't speak about, what's happening in the world, but this is actually what we're seeing. As you can see, the brown area is the medical health care sector, and that's the prime target that they're going after. So what have we done? Again, one of the things that we have done is we actually, thinking outside the box, decided to take it a step further, okay? Which is something that a CERT normally would do. We actually decided to go on a roadshow. We actually decided to go to actually visit these companies and give them a cyber threat briefing that specifically let them know who is the cyber threat actor, why are they going after you, why should you care, and why should you take actions and take heed to all the recommendations and mitigations that we have. We also provided them with a list of indicators of compromise that are associated with the cyber threat actors that are going after these private companies. We even met with the folks that actually take your blood sample. You know that every time that you go to a doctor here in the United States and you take blood, they take blood because you don't know what's going on with you, so everything they say is you gotta draw blood. So they take the blood sample, they put it into a tube, and they send it to a company. We have two major companies here in the United States. One is called Quest Diagnostics, the other one is called LabCorp. And we actually went to their headquarters building, because guess what? Every time they draw blood from you, the doctor, guess what happens? They always say, come back tomorrow and we'll have the results. You know the reason why they say come back tomorrow? Because they ship the blood to the company overnight. They only work overnight. They don't work during the day because everybody analyzes everything during the night. You know why? Because during the day, you're in the hospital. You're in the doctor's office, so they don't have your blood yet. They have to wait for you to give your blood. So then at night, they have a courier that comes and picks up all the blood samples from all the medical clinics around the country, every single city, every single state, and they have an office building where they go bring everything in, right? The only time that a human person touches that sample is when they pick it up from the doctor. Once they take it to the shop, it's all robotics. They get a barcode assigned to it, which has all your information, name, date of birth, home address, phone number, who's your wife, who's your kids, all your information that's in there. And then it goes through a whole bunch of machines that do the analysis to find out if you have Alzheimer's, diabetes, hepatitis, whatever the case may be. And the results come back the next day. Now, you thought someone actually looked at that. No, no one looked at that. It was actually a machine. Believe it or not, some of the machines, robots, are actually running on Windows NT. Flat network, no segmentation whatsoever, Everybody can install anything on the network. There's no, nothing, no security whatsoever. And can you imagine, right? So we actually, again, went to those companies. We took it on a road show and actually visited them, went to their location, and actually sat with them, their security officer, and explained to them what's going on. We actually brought the FBI with us, so the FBI was able to give a more detailed law enforcement insider briefing. And from a USR perspective, we're able to give a briefing specifically to recommendations and mitigations, the do's and don'ts, why they should care, and so forth. So it's a joint effort. But that's what it's taking here for us in the US to be able to alert and prepare those victims that are constantly getting targeted. As you can see, they're easy target. Old technology, no security, lots of PI information, lots of privacy information, right? Prime target. So another action that we took here as well is in terms of information sharing. We developed something called an analyst report because we saw a trend from July of 2014 to present, actually to July, August timeframe. We saw a trend of about 9 major incidents. That includes OPM as well. That include a lot of 9 incidents where millions of records were stolen. So we saw a trend, and as a result of that trend, we developed a protocol and an analysis report that included the trend analysis as well as all of the technical indicators of compromise from each of those incidents, going back a year, right? So we're able to share that across with all of our federal partners, international partners, state, local governments, industry partners, and so forth, even with also OAS as well, so sharing that broadly with everyone. And here's what we had in here. Here's the product number. I think Diego has a copy of the product. I think we already disseminated it with everyone. But that's what we saw, 9 different incidents, okay, indicators of compromise we were able to share with everyone. And of course, we share it at the TLP green level because we wanted to get out there to the cybersecurity community because it is important. Notice that it's not TLP white because we don't want to put all the technical indicators into the public website because they were derived from an incident. And if the FBI, does not allow us to share that in the public domain, we just simply can't do it. If we do that, then guess what happened in the next incident? That we're not going to share information with us because they say we can't give you anything because whatever we give you, you throw it out there. So it's a trusted relationship. Yes, we want to disseminate. Yes, we want to work with everyone, but we have to be mindful of the sensitivity around the threat indicator information that we're sharing. Okay? I want to talk about another trend here. On the 9 incidents that we worked on, we saw a very, very unique trend. We saw the same type of malware, remote access Trojan, or RAT, used in 7 of those incidents. The same. Now, for those of you that never heard of PlugX before, highly, highly sophisticated piece of malware. Okay? First of all, when it gets into your network, it does not write to disk. So you don't have to double click and install it. It lives in memory. And because it lives in memory, it's able to actually have something called modules. So within those modules, as I'm the threat actor, I'm the bad guy, and I deploy my malware into your network, I can say now, I'm going to activate the module that does keylogger. So I want you to keylog every single keystroke on the keyboard and let me know, and send that back to me tomorrow at 11 p.m. And that's what the malware would not do anything else but record every single keystroke and send it to me the next day. Then I'm going to say, now I want you to go ahead and I'm going to activate the module that says enumeration. And I want you to enumerate the entire network. I want you to tell me all the domain accounts, IP ranges, segments, host names, all of that, and send it to me. And so as you can see, there's a pattern here where there's an interaction between the malware and the threat actor. They can add and remove in real time. Add and remove in real time, and they do not have to wait for the malware to do something already pre-configured, like go ahead and sweep and scan everything, wait a couple of days, and then come back to me. No, no, no. The malware is already pre-configured to do specific things, and then I, as a threat actor, will change every single thing as frequently as I want to. If I want to remove the keylogger module, I'll remove it and replace it with the peer-to-peer module. The peer-to-peer will allow me to then do transfer of information, right? So as you can see, here's all the list of things that it can do. right? Provide remote access to the victim system, collect running processes and modules, start, stop, load, reconfigure services, create and delete files, modify the system registry. All those features and capabilities happen on the victim machine without the malware having to write to disk. It was very challenging, because if we see an indication of the malware, and the first thing you do is reboot the machine, you lost all evidence of the malware, and you lost everything the malware collected and did, right? So it was very challenging. Because there was a trend of the same malware being used in 7 of those incidents, we worked closely together with the FBI and other Department of Defense partners and the intelligence community, because they also, had an inventory of the PlugX malware. Now, if you do any open source research in PlugX, you're going to find reports about Chinese actors or hackers using the PlugX malware, right? So we know that this malware is a customized piece of malware designed to do specifically what it says right here, So it's very, 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 very difficult to work with. Specifically, one of the case studies, the most recent one that we had was the Blue Cross Blue Shield Excellus company. If you had not heard of that incident before, or if you have, basically they found out that it has been on the network for almost 2 years. The threat actors were on their network, and they just found out when the incident was first discovered a couple of weeks ago, last month, right? So it is a challenge because, again, medical companies are not focused on security. They're focused on revenue and saving people's lives, right? Which is important, right? But at the same time, because they have such a lax security network, then that's what we have here, and it's one of the cases that we want to talk about here. And of course, you heard, all of you guys here probably heard about the Anthem incident. It's again another incident that we tracked and worked with the FBI, and it was basically, a wake-up call. We had 80 million records, okay? And Anthem is so big because out of Anthem you have CareFirst, Blue Cross, you have Excellus, and so all those companies that are under, Anthem, and they manage all of that. So it was an indication that when the first incident occurred, the question is, was that it? Was that the only thing? Or did it actually propagate it or spread to the other sub-companies that are part of that? And that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing all of the other divisions and sub-companies were actually also infected as a result of this campaign. I briefly talked about the OPM incident first at the beginning of the presentation. And I pretty much covered everything that's on the slide already. But as you can see here, it's something that was definitely a wake-up call in terms of the fact that, their senior management thought that there's no way the actors could ever get to their crown jewels, and we know now they actually did, right? I got my letter saying, hey, Omar Cruz, your information's been compromised. The Chinese got all your data. I said, okay, good. Let them have it. All right, so in terms of some of the cyber threat actors, attacks and vectors that we have seen predominantly across all of these major cyber breaches and data breaches that we have worked on over the past couple of years, it's shameful to see that we still have spear phishing emails as the #1 vector. I have been working in this field for over 10 years, and every single time it never fails. It's always phishing emails. And do you know the reason why we still have phishing emails as the #1 vector? Because it works. It works. As long as you have people that will click on links and open attachments on emails that do not belong to them, you're going to have this problem. I've always said you can spend millions and millions of dollars. You can go ahead and convince your management and say, I need this much money to buy this great tool because this great tool is going to protect us from this bad thing. Great. Deploy the tool. But it's just a tool. Unless you find, tweak it, and play with it, and actually massage it to let you see what you wanted to do, it's not going to do everything for you, right? So as long as you have people that open emails and attachments, this is going to continue to be the #1 vector because it's human nature. Think about it this way. We have a lot of incidents where employees get an email that says, we have a mail courier here called UPS. You guys heard of them, UPS, DHL. And some others. They get an email that says, here's your invoice. Now, common sense says, if you did not ship anything via UPS or DHL, why would you think that this email is for you if you didn't ship anything? But people will still think, oh, there's my invoice. And they'll click, open the attachment, and now they got malware on the computer. It's unbelievable, but it happens every day. We're seeing a lot of water holding activities. Obviously, this is where malware gets implanted on a legitimate website through the use of an iframe. Basically it redirects users to a specific domain that's actually then is malware, and then the user continues to get compromised. It's a challenge because they have to continually work with our partners to find out which websites actually got waterholed or actually got infected with malware and how long. Sometimes the malware may be parked in there for a day or 2 or 5 days, and then you have a problem where the legitimate company is saying, why are you blocking me and why are you blocking my customers to get to me? I was like, well, you have this malware then, and they're like, I don't care. I want my customers to access my website. So now you have a challenge, right? Because how do you convince those CEOs and those big company owners that they actually are, assisting with the malware campaign instead of helping in deterring the malware campaign? We have the situation with third-party vendors, Adobe, Java, right? Microsoft. It's a problem. It's never going to go away. We saw the reports a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month now, about the zero-day exploits from Flash, and the fact that this company actually had those 0 days and never publicly disclosed them, the hacker group. So now we have this issue. And it's a problem because we continually focus so much on patching the operating systems, make sure that the systems and database are up to date. But how often do we focus on, let's make sure that Flash and Java and all the other third-party plugins out there are actually fully patched, right? And that's the reason why the threat actors are going after those third-party applications, because it's easy for them to get there because they know many organizations do not have a policy that says we're going to take action on this as soon as the information is available, okay? The same thing goes for web service, and the same thing goes for remote access. Believe it or not, to this day, we still have major organizations here in the United States, including federal agencies, that are still using single-factor VPN, meaning the same login password you use to log into your computer is the same password you use to connect remotely into the network. It's a challenge, but we have to continuously promote this so they can get, they can get action on that. One of the piece that I want to say real quick in the case of OPM, one of the reasons why also OPM thought this wasn't going to be an incident is because the way that inspectors work, let me share some information with you. When an employee needs a government clearance, it gets assigned to a company. Let's say Keypoint was one of the companies, right? They hire an independent contractor who then uses a laptop, and they go, is an inspector. And they go, they get your address, they call you and say, hey, I'm going to see you, I want to meet with you so I can ask you all these questions. So guess what? Nothing is connected to the government network yet. So he records that information, meets with you, sits with you, and asks you all the questions, and inputs all the information into that one laptop. Then they have a process where once a week or once a month, they connect to the OPM network, right, through an IPsec tunneling, right? They have access control list that says any traffic coming from this IP range, allow it to only do this. So they have contain, so only allow them to access the database and input the information. So OPM said, we're secure, the access control list will protect me. And guess what happened, right? The inspector got a phishing email, double click on the link, the malware dropped on the laptop, and the malware simply waited for him to connect to the OPM network. As soon as he connected to the OPM network, it immediately identified the access control list and bypassed it, right? So I'm sharing this with you so you can, yes, we have access control lists on our firewalls and routers and everything, but hey, how many times do you audit them to ensure they actually are doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And they're actually allowing what's supposed to be allowed and not allowing other things that are not supposed to be allowed. One big issue here is also network segmentation. One big trend that we have seen in all of the incidents is pretty much a walk in the park. A lot of the breaches that we have seen, the major breaches, there's no network segmentation. So your corporate network is connected to the development network, production, development, human resources, engineering, IT. Everyone is just one flat network connected. There's nothing in between, no VLANs, nothing, right? And so when the actors get into this network, the first thing they do is they map the network and they're able to get through. For those of you that have heard of the the postal incident, the U.S. postal incident that happened this year as well, it was a completely flat network. The actors got in it and they were able to go everywhere in the network. So it's important that organizations consider, network segmentation as part of the security posture. General user accounts. Another trend that we are seeing is threat actors actually compromising user accounts, your power users, but not actually compromising domain admin accounts yet. What does that mean? Well, what we have seen is that we use, Joe, whatever name, account to do all of the navigation across the network, to identify what's in the network, do a lot of the enumeration what's happening, but nothing gets installed, nothing gets created, nothing gets changed, nothing gets modified. That you're simply doing reconnaissance across. Now, when they're ready to grab data and move it out the network, then they'll switch from the regular user account to the one that has elevated privileges. So that way, it allows them to do more on the network going completely undetected, right? If I'm threat actor such and such, right, if I'm a threat actor and I compromise the account of all my crews, and I know he works from 8 to 4 p.m., and during 8 to 4 p.m. I'm in that network doing reconnaissance, no one will think, right, that I'm a bad guy, right? And that's one of the trends that we're seeing here as well. Again, I already talked about lack of two-factor authentication. Interesting, lack of net flow traffic, right? So a lot of organizations, rely so much heavily on the the IDS sensors, right? And IPS sensors, that some people forget to look at the net flow traffic, right? So think about it. If all you're doing is looking at signature-based tools, right, like an IDS sensor or an IPS sensor, right, all you're doing is alerting on those things. You're alerting on the knowns, but no one is alerting on the unknowns, okay? So net flow traffic is the only one that will actually give you information into the unknown, right? Because this is where we start seeing patterns of activity, right? So if I do not generate, if I have an IDS sensor, intrusion detection system, and I have a specific signature for PlugX, let's say PlugX, well, guess what? All I have is information about that variant, about that sample of that malware. If there's another sample that I don't know about, how am I going to catch it? There's no way, right? But if I look at the net flow traffic and I start seeing outbound traffic to specific IP addresses over specific ports, and I see bytes being transferred at certain hours of the day, let's say at 3 in the morning, I want to know why. Why is that happening? Is it legitimate traffic? Is it not? And that's when you start your investigation, by doing that level of out-of-the-box thinking, right? If you have your staff just sitting at a sensor, at a monitor, and just wait for that signature to alert and trip, you're pretty much really way behind the power curve, because there's more that needs to be done, not only at the network level, but also at the endpoint level, right? And again, poor server discipline. We have seen incidents where, believe it or not, we have network system administrators put a server on production with outbound internet-facing connectivity without being properly patched. And of course, we had incidents where immediately, within seconds, we saw the bad guys come in and immediately start enumerating and compromising the server. So trust me, if you put it out there, it will get compromised. So basic cyber hygiene, we talked about this, minimizing administrative privileges, application directory whitelisting. It's very important here, okay? Should everything that installs on an operating system of the network that you manage install and execute from the temp directory? That's the question. There are files that are legitimately, need to deploy, execute from the temp directory, but not every single file needs to do that, right? So you have to do some level of application whitelisting in your network. You need to be able to do some baselining, right? To identify what is a whitelisted application on my computer system and what is not. And it's difficult. I know it's difficult because now you have, security trying to find out, what's going on my computer. Well, some organizations that I have worked with, they struggle to say, how do I deploy this? How do I know what's good and what is bad? Because, hey, we're doing this now, but we've been in operations for 5, 10 years. So how do I know what's been out there over so many years? And in some cases, we have organizations who simply decided, this is what we are going to say it's authorized, and everything else, an alert will go off because they use tools. And when the alert goes up, someone is going to call my number and say, hey, I can no longer use this application. And now we're going to know who, has the application. It's just another way to think about it, right? Now, depending on the type of organization you have, that may cost you your job. Others may applaud you for doing a good job. So you have to weigh your pros and cons and figure out the best approach to work through that, okay? Because it is a challenge, but nonetheless, it is something that needs to happen in order for you to really know what's happening within the operating systems of your enterprise environment. Another question I want to pose here is about operating system vulnerabilities. How often do you patch? Every 30 days? Every 90 days? When? Okay, great. You have a policy that says every 30 days I'm going to patch. But what happens if today a 0-day vulnerability is identified for your Windows server? Are you going to wait another 30 days to patch that? Or are you going to go out of cycle? Or do you have the resources and capabilities to be able to do that today or tomorrow or this weekend? You have to pose those questions to your security team with your organization and say, how can we do this outside of the cycles that we already have agreed on? And if you don't have any policy, if you don't have any way to do this, you need to start planning and figure out how I'm going to do this, because it is important to be able to have something to help you, first of all, give you the authority to be able to take action. Because if you don't have anything in policy written, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, and last but not least, keeping the workforce educated. It is important. Again, people are going to continue to be people, and it's very difficult. You can be the best IT security person in your whole company, the best IT person in there. But again, as long as you have users who are uneducated, being convinced to click or open attachments that they do not know where it came from, you're going to continue to have a challenge. You will have job security, yes, right? Because people need you to do security for their companies, right, and their organizations. But you're still going to have issues with incidents that you have to work through and mitigate, right? So it is important to develop some type of education program for your employees or for the staff of your organizations, at least on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or annual basis, right? Here in some federal agencies in the U.S. government, we'll make sure their employees get training once a year. Is that working out? I don't know. We still have major incidents. Maybe it should happen more often, right? But it's up to the organization to make a decision. No one here can tell you what is the magic sauce. Is it 30 days, the magic? Is it every 90 days, every week, every day? I don't know, right? But the good thing is continue to promote security awareness through training that you can do, whether it's a webinar, whether it's actually bringing people in a big conference room. Think about innovative ways to do that, right? Because we're living in the 21st century, and we can no longer have everybody in one room at the same time on the same day. People are going to call out sick. My baby's sick. I got a doctor's appointment. I have to go to college. I can't do this. So hey, set up some webinars and say, hey, dial in. Go to this URL, and boom, now you can see me and I can see you, and now we can have the training, right? You have to get innovative in order to help people and train them, because it is important. At the end of the day, all the work that you do can easily be for naught, meaning useless, if people continue to do the things they do on the network, continue to cause incidents. Because you know what the perception is from your managers? You didn't do a good job. So, well, what do you mean I didn't do a good job? I did all the security assessment. I made sure that we patch accordingly. I made sure that we have all the security tools in place. What do you mean I didn't do a good job? Well, we have this many incidents over here. How can you do a good job if we have all this many incidents? Well, it is not the incidents. It's actually the people causing the incidents, right? But who's going to convince your big boss that that's actually reality? It's difficult. So your job is at stake, right? Because now the incidents reflect negative on you as a security person. So it is important, right, that you promote security within your workforce, not just to ensure they're safe, but also to keep your job. All right. And finally, I couldn't have the presentation without a slide from President Obama. No, I'm just kidding, actually. I just threw it in there. But we actually, President Obama actually visited our shop, our office building, He came in February to announce new legislation, or as we call it, executive order, to promote information sharing in the form of something called automated information indicator sharing, or AIS. So what happens is within AIS, or automated indicator sharing, we're trying to promote not near real time, but real time sharing of indicators of compromise with private companies and government partners that we work with that sign up to this program. Now, the question is, what is real time? It's 5 minutes, it's an hour, 24 hours. If you ask me, real time to me is like 2-3 days from now. Because that's how long it takes for me to do an investigation and find out what is actionable and what I can give you to help you, right? Otherwise, I'm giving you garbage in, garbage out, which is not good. So we've been working on this project since February to identify how do we make this work, right? How do we do reputation analysis of an indicator? If I'm saying it's bad and no one else is saying that it's bad, then why should you believe me that it's bad? What do I have to show you that it's bad, right? It's important to touch those points and address those questions, because you're going to make a decision as a partner. You're going to make a decision to take action on information I'm sharing with you. And if you don't have any context other than, well, Omar gave it to me, I guess they must be bad. That's not a good answer, right? It needs to have enough contextual information to give you the confidence level, and that's the word, confidence, that this indicator is actually bad because all of the activities that we worked in the background, and what we found, right? So that's important. Also, how do we ensure that we eliminate up front a lot of the, the false positives, right? So malware, a lot of times, for those of you that investigate malware, the first thing that it does sometimes is connect to a legitimate IP address, right? So if you're company X and you're telling me, hey, I want to share this with you. We found this malware and this all the indicators. And the first indicator I see there is an IP address that results to Google. Am I going to deploy that and say this is bad? No. It's a lack of information on the company because they failed to realize the first thing the malware is going to do is connect to Amazon, Google, and all the other legitimate websites and IP addresses in order to see if they can get out to the internet, right? So we have to do a level of internal analysis before we determine what is bad and what is not bad. Because just because the malware executed and call out to an IP or domain doesn't mean that the IP or domain is bad. We still have to do the triaging analysis. So it's a challenge, but again, we're working through that in order to help us get to that point. And this is something that we've been working on, and I'm sure that as we collaborate with Diego's team, I'm sure that more information is going to come down for you guys to know where we're at in the process and what are we doing with this program. But that's what we're trying to promote, and that's the direction that we are moving into to help the community at large. And last but not least, again, I talked about information sharing and capabilities, and again, here's where we are here today, working with the OAS, First Community, and so forth. It is important. As you can see, it's something that's part of us. We're not just focused on the federal government. We're not just focused on what's happening within the U.S. private industries and companies, but we are concerned about how do we work with everyone, because at the end of the day, the key theme that I want you to have from this presentation is shared responsibility. That's what it all comes down to, is shared responsibility, right? If I see something bad, I have a responsibility to share that information, because you may have a vested interest in that information. And what's impacting me today could impact you tomorrow, right? So it's important. And at this point, I think this is the last slide, and of course, and I'm gonna skip the slide because a lot of you are already familiarized with StickStaxi. Is this the first time anybody see StickStaxi at all? First time? No? Yeah, everybody has heard of that, and that's the direction that we're going as well, in terms of how do we do this in a machine-to-machine communication. All right, I'm not sure how much time I have for questions, but any questions that anyone may have, I'll open it up. Are there any questions for me?
We have one question for Wilson.
Okay.
Buenos días.
Hola.
Mi Mi nombre es Wilson Prieto, trabajo en el CER Nacional de Colombia. Quisiéramos saber cómo realizan ustedes el proceso cuando hay un evento, un incidente en sitio, cómo generan la cadena de custodia de una manera muy general, la cadena de custodia, y cómo interactúan con las unidades judiciales para ese tema. O sea, nosotros hemos tenido, pues, tenemos un proceso, pero se nos ha dificultado un poco el tema de judicialización en Colombia. Quisiéramos saber cómo ustedes lo manejan y qué nos pueden recomendar.
Ok, perfecto. So buena pregunta. Well, English. So good question. ¿Lo puedo hablar en español o en inglés? No sé. Well, I'll do it in English. Y después le explico más, no sé. So what we have is, again, you heard me say at the beginning, we have a team of lawyers, right? We have a team of lawyers in our team, right? So whenever we have a major incident like OPM and other ones that I referenced today, we have developed a process called an RTA, which stands for Request for Technical Assistance, RTA. So this is a legal document that specifically outlines, what we want to do, what are we going to do when we go to your organization, we knock on the door, what are we going to do for you, how we're going to treat your data, where we're going to move your data, and what level of support we're going to provide. So the RTA, or Request for Technical Assistance, is the one that codifies all the information, all the language that tells that company, here's what I'm going to do for you, here's what I need from you, and here's what you will gain from me being part of this investigation, right? Again, we're trying to fight the perception that here's the government knocking on my door trying to take my information. And we don't want that. We don't want that perception. What we want is for them to feel that we are a partner in the fight, okay? And the reality is a lot of these private organizations do not have a full forensics lab, a full malware lab, a full incident response lab. And if they try to hire Mandiant, it's a lot of $1 million they're gonna have to pay, right? So we do it for free, we don't charge. And what happens is, here's the process. There's a major incident, we confirm it through our sources. We initiate the RTA process, we provide it to our lawyers review all of the information. Once the lawyers approve the language that we're gonna include in there, then we take it to the CIO of that victim company, or that organization. And then the victim CIO will tell us if they agree or do not agree in the changes they want in the RTA. Whatever changes they want us to make to the RTA, obviously we have to honor it because it is their network, it is their environment. So we make the change to the RTA, then we send it back, and then now once the CIO agrees and we agree, then both sign the document. So the CIO signs the document, and our CIO signs the document, and now we have a legal agreement of what are we going to do. We also, in the document, indicate who from our team will be deployed. So the actual name of the analyst, what is their rank, what is their specialty, how many years of experience, certifications in the industry, and so forth. And all the information is included in the RTA, so that way they know that we're sending subject matter experts to those incidents. We also have a funding line that enables us to get on a train or get on a plane and rent a hotel for us to stay there. Typically, when we have a major incident, the analysts work 10, 12-hour days, fully deployed, completely on that network, doing all the investigation. And then we have another team in the back that it's waiting for them to come back to give them the information. So that way they can record all of the activities, what they found, and put it into our own incident tracking tool. Because can you imagine if you work for 12 hours in an incident and then you still expect to come back to the shop and still, type away everything that you found on the network? It's impossible. These guys are married with kids. These are not single guys, 18-year-old. These are 30, 40-year-old guys who are in the field for many years. They're married, they have kids, and they have a house to go to. But yet, we have to codify all of that into the RTA. So the RTA is a document, and we should be able to, if you get with Diego and put it as an action item for me, we should be able to give you a copy of what that looks like, so you can then do something similar with your own organization. Yeah?
Okay, muchas gracias.
Okay. Any other questions?
Omar, from me, just to follow up on Wilson's question, I think some of the certs that are still young, I think it's to understand when does law enforcement get involved or when does the cert get law enforcement involved. The information is shared as in a trusted relationship. They see that a crime, if they do have a law, some crime has been committed, when or who engages law enforcement? Does the victim or does the cert?
So that's a good point. It's a very good question too. One of the challenges of any national level cert is, what is our mission? What are we supposed to do? And what is our responsibility? So I'll answer the question a little bit differently. Here's how I'm going to answer that question. When we first started as a national level cert, it was started so we can receive metrics. That was the only thing. So that way the U.S. government, the U.S. Congress did not have a mechanism to find out how many security incidents were happening within the federal agency. So they said, let's stand up a team that can receive those metrics and provide those metrics to Congress. And that was 2003. But obviously, major incidents were occurring, and we need to take action. It becomes sort of like a SOC, Security Operations Center, actually doing the incidents. And as we mature and grew, to her question, we had to identify what is our focus area. Do we focus on every single incident, on every single spear phishing email, on every single denial of service attack, on every single web defacement, on every single, it's impossible, right? Are we going to investigate every single crypto wall incident? I don't know. There's a new vulnerability with an app in an iPhone. Should we investigate that? So yeah, it is a challenge. So you have to, think as to what is going to give you as a national level cert, what should be your focus area? And one of the things that we have identified in the U.S. is that our focus should be mostly on the major APT actors that are targeting U.S. government entities, because that's the area where we lose a lot of the intellectual property that can impede the U.S. government and that can also impact the U.S. government. So we made the decision as a national cert to focus on nation-state actors, specifically targeting federal agencies. And as a result of that, that's our primary area. We work with other partners to help with the phishing issue, like the APWG, the Anti-Phishing Working Group. So when employees from federal agencies or companies send us phishing information, we also send it to the Anti-Phishing Working Group, so that way they can handle all the phishing activities. However, we will work on those that are specifically associated with a nation-state actor activity, like China, North Korea, whatever. We will engage and investigate those, but if it's just your run-of-the-mill regular phishing spam, we're not gonna do anything with that. What about denial of service attacks? Are we gonna get involved with that? It's very difficult, because when it comes to denial of service attack, the ISP, is the one that has the contract with the company or the agency. And through a service level agreement, or SLA, there's a contract that says, this is how long it's gonna take me to redirect that denial of service attack and ensure that you don't suffer any outages. So as you can see, we don't have the grasp or the authority to come in and take any action, because we don't manage any of that. We will track it as an incident, we will track it, we will record it as an incident, but we will let the ISP work those incidents, right? So the only incidents that we ourselves constantly engage in working are the ones that involve nation-state actors, targeting specific federal agencies in the system-critical sectors, and of course, deploying analysts to help them, help those victims with those issues, right? So it's a little bit different, as you can see, because the expectation is, if something happened in the world, what is US CERT doing about it? Like, no, that's not our focus. We have our primary responsibility, and that's what we're here to do and help, right? That's, and hope to answer your question, but we made the decision over the years as we grew that we just couldn't do it all. So we had to delegate to other organizations and partners to do some of the work that we need to do. For example, the vulnerability analysis. Whenever you see a uscert.gov and you see a new vulnerability, it says US CERT, but that's not my team doing that. You know who's doing that? It's Carnegie Mellon, SCI, the Security Engineering Institute, right? We hire them and pay them, as through a fund, so they can do all of the vulnerability assessments and let us know what those vulnerabilities are, and then provide the products into the public website, because we couldn't do that. We don't have the manpower to be able to do a proof of concept of a zero-day vulnerability and then do testing and regression of that vulnerability. It's impossible. Okay. Hope that answers that question. Any other question?
We have one more question on the side here.
Omar, buenos días. Ernesto Pérez, Edia, Ecuador. Indicabas que ustedes tienen una herramienta que a través de ustedes podemos hacer uso para analizar temas de malware, ¿correcto? No sé si puedes describir o indicarme dónde podemos contactarles para validar cómo es el procedimiento, porque me imagino que no es solamente mandar lo que a mí se me ocurra, sino que tiene que ser de cierta forma, a cierto lugar, usando ciertos mecanismos.
Sí, tenemos un email address y un website. Lo que voy a hacer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to Diego so he can send it to everybody. So that way it's better disseminated, okay? So I'm going to take it as an action item for me, and then I'll make sure that we send it to everyone here today so the way everybody has it, okay? Good, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Could you just join me in just thanking Amar?
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
As you would have noticed, the speaker that was supposed to be after Mar, we don't know what happened. We didn't see him, so we just allowed the conversation to just flow and just to continue. So we really thank Amar for extending himself for so long without even knowing what was going on. We're going to break for lunch, and I just have one announcement to make. MIT will be holding an information session in this room. It will be open to all the different tracks for those of you who want to take your lunch, which is in Aztec, and take it back to this room to listen. But it's an informative session, and they will be available here for questions and conversation during lunch. We'll be breaking until 2 again, where we'll continue. But if you would like, you could grab your lunch, come back here. There will not be any interpretation because interpreters have to take lunch as well. So for those of you who would like to sit in the session, you could sit in. All right, thank you so much, and see you at 2 o'clock.